for 515 Fantasy Football.
I know football.
Are you ready for some football?
Domination on Sundays begins with listening to these guys on Thursdays.
You ready for this?
Nearly 40 years of fantasy football experience between them.
Yeah!
One is a proud veteran of the United States Marine Corps, husband and father, entering his 17th year of fantasy competition. Brian Eikenberry. The other, also a proud husband and father, is one of the winningest fantasy minds in the state. Celebrating 23 years of excellence, Andy Hall.
Let's get the game on!
It's showtime. The 515 Fantasy Football Podcast with your hosts, Brian Eikenberry and Andy Hall.
Welcome to our final show of the 2015 season. I am Andy Hall. With me, as always, is Brian Eikenberry. Brian, if there is one thing we have learned this season, I think it's the value of a deep bench, particularly at the running back position. Wouldn't you agree?
I would definitely agree. And looking across the leagues that I have participated in, he who drafted backups won the league this year.
It's just incredible. I think we find ourselves saying it year after year after year that, wow, this game is getting so much more violent. Players are getting hurt at an increasing rate. 2015 was, of course, no exception. We lost a lot of big names, and it's all reflected in the fantasy numbers, which we'll go over position by position here in just a bit. We're glad to have you aboard for what I've already called a total geek fest. As Brian and I have crunched the numbers, we will share our recap of the fantasy football season, what went right, what went wrong, and we'll apply those lessons toward 2016 drafts, which, by the way, are less than 8 months away, Brian.
Yeah, I'm already excited. We have kind of an end of the year party for one of my commissioned leagues, and we were already talking. So, are we doing a arena league fantasy football this year? Looking for something, because as the year is over, we're already looking to the next year, just for fun, because this is why we do it, and this is what we miss.
No matter how you found us, iTunes, Stitcher, Libsyn, or on the dial at 1350 AM ESPN Radio in Des Moines, we thank you from the bottom of our hearts for making our first year of the 515 Fantasy Football Show the massive success I think Brian and I both agree it has been. And Brian, it's been a success not only in terms of bringing some listeners in year number one and people really kind of getting into the show, which was really neat to see throughout the course of the season, but it was also a success, I think, in terms of our prognostication skills.
Yeah, being at the end of the year gives you an opportunity to go back and look at the things we have done in the past and how well or how bad we have done. So I am super, super pleased to announce that after our 17 weeks of grading, we have finished with a plus 445 positive grading system in our highly scientific format. Plus 445.
Wow.
Not only... Go ahead.
Number.
Yeah, it's huge. 445 positive grades. Also, our bargain bins, we finished, which we pick 3 a week, we finished plus 46 with our bargain bins. We nailed 46 bargain bins for people on their waiver wires.
Not too bad. And
no.
They needed them. Again, going back to the injury conversation, and we'll have that as we break down each of the major positions, project into 2016. Plus, a little later, talk league variations in case you're looking to freshen things up in your league. And we'll have a debate over rules and scoring. That'll wrap up this edition of the 515 Fantasy Show, circa 2015. Of course, we are now into 2016. Happy New Year, Brian.
Happy New Year to you as well, partner.
Let's start by looking at the quarterback position, shall we? The quarterback position wasn't really an odd year for quarterbacks. In fact, I think if nothing else, Brian, in my opinion, 2015 gives me, proof positive, I guess you could say, that you really should probably wait on a quarterback in your fantasy draft.
Yeah, looking at the overall numbers, just in the top 10 or so, only about, 50 points separated the top 5, 50, 60 points separated top 5, spread that out over an assumed 13 weeks, and you're just a few points a week difference from drafting Cam Newton in the first round versus Russell Wilson in the 8th round.
And, I typically look at top 12s because I figure a lot of leagues are 12-team leagues. So 12 is my favorite number when looking at recaps. And from the top, which you mentioned was Cam Newton, 448.9 points in standard scoring leagues this season. The number 12 quarterback was Ryan Fitzpatrick of the Jets, 338.9. So a little more than 100 points less than Cam Newton. And again, you spread that out over the course of a season, and our season is, most of us, 13 weeks regular season. And, it's not that big a difference. So, Again, I think you're looking at the top 12 quarterbacks. So these are all assuming these are the starting quarterbacks in a 12-team league. And week to week, you're not gaining that much of an advantage by drafting a quarterback in the first or second round as opposed to waiting.
No, you're not. And it's that opportunity to look at those numbers to really put things into perspective. Just because I didn't realize that Cam and Fitzpatrick were only about 100 and some change apart, which is about 7 points a game.
Looking in comparison to what I like to do, Brian, is I like to look at last year as opposed to this year. And I have a top 12 from last year in standard scoring leagues. Aaron Rodgers was your top scoring quarterback in 2014. 438.6 points, which is a little more than 10 points less than what Cam Newton scored here in 2015. And it's funny, Brian, you have the same list I have because I sent this to you. But you look at those top 12s, and they're very similar. Number 1, number 2, number 3, number 4. Wherever they're ranked, you look at the numbers they put up at those ranks, and they're very similar, within about 10 points generally.
Yeah, if you're just comparing the positions, not the players, or the rankings, not the players, and they are surprisingly similar. Just for an example, last year, Aaron Rodgers was number 1. This year, Cam Newton, it's a 10-point difference. The second place quarterback in 2014 was Andrew Luck with 423. 2015's second quarterback was Tom Brady with 424. So 1.6 points separated the second place from last year to this year. It's insane.
Again, I think this is further proof, Brian, that when you're looking to target positions in draft situations, and this is something we'll revisit in August when we reconvene before drafts happen. But I think unless you really feel like you need somebody who you believe will be an elite quarterback, I think you can wait on the quarterback position. I think you're much better off loading up, especially on pass catchers, yes, running backs as well, depending on how your draft is going, where you're drafting from, and things like that. Now, again, we mentioned the fact that you look at the ranks between 2014 and 2015, and they're very similar, usually, like I said, within about 10, 15 points. So then when you look to prognosticate ahead to 2016, you keep those numbers in mind, I think. And I'm not sure how your top 12 looks, Brian. I sort of mocked one up for you, and I'm not sure I would change anything. Looking at my list, do you see anything you would change?
Sure. So I do see one glaring one that I want to remove out of your top 12, and that's Drew Brees. With the rumors of Sean Payton on the way out, being possibly traded away for a second-round draft pick.
Not happening.
And the possibility that Drew Brees may not be there.
Also not happening. Want to know why?
Why?
Just today, Sean Payton announced he's sticking with the Saints.
Oh, just like those vote of confidence is just before they can somebody.
It just happened. So, if Sean Payton's sticking around, that means Drew Brees is around for at least another year.
Yeah, I don't know. He's 1 year older. It's kind of the Peyton Manning thing. When is Drew Brees going to break?
What happened in 2015 to Drew Brees? He lost his biggest target in Jimmy Graham. He had essentially the same players around him, Brandon Cooks, Benjamin Watson, who preseason most people thought would be surpassed by Josh Hill, but he was not. You have young talent in Brandon Coleman. I mean, who else is there really aside from their running game? Am I missing somebody? Because Marquise Colston really isn't somebody that most people will target.
I mean, I guess you got some young guys, but here's one thing. So Drew Brees finished number 5 in standard scoring with 383 points. You address that 7-touchdown game and knock it down to his average of 2. That's 35, 7, 5, 30 points. That knocks him all the way down to 10. So, you got to grade on a bell curve here. So you got to take the top 2% and the bottom 2%. So if you remove that 7-touchdown game, that really knocks him down the list because, while he had the 7 touchdowns, but that was a statistical anomaly where him and Eli Manning just went crazy on each other. That's not going to happen every single year. So, that knocks him down a lot.
I want to say he had a game like that in 2014 as well, at least one. And, I mean, look at the ranks, Brian. He was number 6 at 370.4 back in 2014. He was number 5 after losing Jimmy Graham. He jumped up a spot and scored 383.9 points. And this is in a season where quarterbacks really didn't have any major losses.
Yeah, I agree. I think Brees is my odd man out just because looking at it, he's the oldest. Is that a fair way to say that? He's the oldest one on the list?
It depends. I think it's completely subjective. It's your opinion. I mean, listen, I'm looking at it in comparison to the situations that other quarterbacks are getting into in 2016.
Sure.
And not knowing how free agency is going to work out and things like that. And I'm also not going to – we have no idea of knowing who's going to draft who. We know the draft order, but we don't know who's drafting who until April. So
we do know one thing, though.
What?
We do know who's going to get a new head coach.
Okay.
And Eli Manning is on your list of 2016 top 12 quarterbacks.
Let me run through the top 12 real quick, just so everybody knows who they are. Okay, Cam Newton is my number 1, and I don't think there should be any argument about that.
No.
Okay. Tom Brady, I'm going to keep at number 2, and I think with Tom Brady, when he gets all those weapons back and healthy next year, he's going to be just fine. And assuming what happened to him this year doesn't happen to him again next year, he's going to be right up there with Cam Newton. It's like 1A and 1B in my opinion. So. Sure. I bring Andrew Luck back into the fold at number 3 for next year. For whatever reason, the Colts decided that they were they were playing a game with his injury. It was almost as if they didn't want everybody to know the severity of it, as in he could come back at any time, but he never did. So it was kind of a lost season for Andrew Luck and all the people that drafted him really high. He did finish second in 2014 in fantasy scoring at the quarterback position with 423.2 points. So Luck's my number 3 going into next year. I'm giving Aaron Rodgers the benefit of the doubt and ranking him at number 4. It could obviously be better than that, assuming Jordy Nelson comes back 100% and is able to do what he's been able to do for a number of years. And I think that Packers offense that passing offense in particular, was really affected by that Jordy Nelson injury. I think that it was sort of a domino effect. After Nelson got hurt, Cobb couldn't be as effective in his role, and so on and so forth. And that's sort of what happened to the Packers passing game.
Yeah, I completely agree with you there. Jordy Nelson getting hurt preseason, that kind of sent shockwaves. They went to their backup plan, and when your backup plan, like Devontae Adams, just fails miserably and can't catch a ball, I mean, that starts, like you said, just the domino effect. And then Rodgers starts to try too hard, and he starts to make bad decisions, and because he keeps putting himself the pressure on. And, yeah, I'm not giving up on Rodgers, but it brings up a good point. Owners might be scared, so you might be picking Luck or Rodgers up kind of late next year.
Yeah, we'll see what happens. Again, I always like the strategy of waiting on quarterback, but that's just me. Ranking 5th in my 2016 ranks is Russell Wilson. He went from number 5 in fantasy scoring at the quarterback position in 2014 to number 3 this year just 23.8 points behind Tom Brady. I have Drew Brees in at number 6. Again, this is a byproduct of Sean Payton returning. Drew Brees going to be back with virtually the same cast of characters. I can't see them doing much in free agency. Perhaps they'll pick up an offensive weapon in the draft. We'll see. Ben Roethlisberger I have ranked number 7. Here's a guy that should be perpetually top 10 just because of the amount of weapons and the caliber of weapons he's got in that Steelers passing game, not to mention the fact that they can't focus on that because Le'Veon Bell and DeAngelo Williams are in that backfield. Tony Romo I have back into a top 12 here for 2016. Assuming that he can come back from yet another clavicle break, again, this is a case where the guy just does it. You know, people talk trash about his playoff history or lack thereof and no luck in the playoffs, but the guy's been a fantasy stud for a number of years now. 2015 was rough for him due to those injuries, but I like him in a top 12. Blake Bortles is who I have ranked 9th. Eli Manning 10th. Derek Carr makes his first appearance at 11, and Andy Dalton of the Bengals rounds out my top 12. So we've heard who you disagree with. Who do you think of the group was the MVP of quarterbacks in 2015? The Top Gun Award, Brian, goes to who?
I am going to go with one Cam Newton. He did what nobody thought he was going to do, including me. I was rooting to see Cam fail when the Kelvin Benjamin thing and everything went down and crumbled around him, and he proved why he will deserve the MVP this year.
Yep, I'm a big fan of that. I think we award the Top Gun Award, the first ever, to Cam Newton. All right, let's move on to the running back position, shall we?
Yes.
And take a look at our top 12, which was led by Devontae Freeman of the Atlanta Falcons, 241.9 fantasy points on the season. That's, again, standard scoring leagues. And I called it. I said he would rank number 1 at the end of the season. And, boy, Adrian Peterson gave him a little run there near the end. But Devontae Freeman is your overall winner of fantasy points in 2015.
Yeah, I think the thing that came down to Adrian Peterson was his lack of touchdowns. You know, he did not have the touchdowns that he should have. He had lots of yards, and, you know, just if he would have had 2 of those touchdowns, he would have beat Devonta Freeman.
What's astounding is that only 9.9 points separated the two of them. Adrian Peterson, of course, won the rushing title again this season. Doug Martin, a surprise at number 3 in fantasy scoring at 197.3. How big a surprise was Doug Martin this season?
Well, watching him get drafted in like the 6th, 7th, and 8th rounds, to see him bounce that high is pretty amazing.
So DeAngelo Williams comes in at number 4. He, of course, was the starter the first couple games of the season as Le'Veon Bell served his 2-game suspension. But then once Le'Veon Bell got injured, DeAngelo Williams stepped right in and had the best year of his fantasy career, NFL career for that matter, 189.5 fantasy points in standard scoring leagues. And he did it in a number of ways. But most importantly, Brian, he was scoring those touchdowns in Bell's absence.
Yeah, I mean, it just goes to a product of, you know, he was playing on a good team with options, so they couldn't always stack the box, and he was playing motivated at his second shot, and he capitalized on his opportunity, and those who handcuffed a stud running back to the backup won and paid off well.
Pittsburgh also the 8th ranked offensive line in run blocking, and this is according to our friends at Pro Football Outsiders. They have Steelers ranked 8, and going into next season, in which they will host not only the NFC North or the AFC North, but also AFC East teams, the Patriots, the Jets. They have Kansas City at home, the Giants, and the Cowboys as well. This is a team that, you know, faces some good defenses and some bad defenses in 2016. What's going to be very interesting to watch, Brian, for Pittsburgh, will Le'Veon Bell be the bell cow that he has been, or has DeAngelo Williams truly proven to be a 1B to Bell's 1A? Will that become a backfield quagmire of sorts?
I don't think so, because I think the Steelers organization understands the need to get running backs 20 to 25 touches a game. And that's the running game in general. We talk about it all the time on the show. Why are they only giving him 10 to 15 touches? He needs more. Because you do. That's how running backs work. And they need to get those touches because not every run play can you rip off 10 to 15 yards. You have to have a couple of twos and a couple of threes and then a 25 in there.
Sure. The rest of the top 12 this season goes Todd Gurley at 5, Lamar Miller, surprisingly, coming in at 6th, David Johnson of the Cardinals at 7, Chris Ivory 8, Matt Forte in what many considered a down year for him. He was number 9 scoring running back this season at 169.7 points. Danny Woodhead, your boy, came in at 10, Latavius Murray at 11, and Frank Gore rounds out the top 12. Now, the biggest thing to look at statistically and again, this is a really good reason to look back at 2014 production when you look at 2015 as well. Do you see what I see, Brian? 2014, there were 3, 6, 8 running backs with over 200 fantasy points in 2014. How many over 200 points in 2015?
Only 2.
Only 2?
Yep. And it's an easy explanation.
Yeah.
It is the progression of the NFL. Teams are moving away from the 60% running and 40% passing and shifting to a 55% pass to a 45% run. So there is that big shift of those people and moving away from those numbers and really inflating the value of those top tier of receivers that we'll get into and their point totals as well.
Yeah, I'm gonna agree with you a little bit. I think there's more to it than that. I think it has something to do with all the injuries, and I think it also has to do with running backs that were put in different situations in 2015. Great example of that, DeMarco Murray, who has, of course, dropped out of the top 12 in 2015. He was the number 2 scoring running back in 2014 at 289.1 points. So,
yeah, I give you that, I guess, because
I think it's a combination. I mean, we lost Bell, we lost Lynch, we lost Foster, Charles, Forsett. Yeah, I mean, we lost a lot of these top-notch guys from 2014 to season-ending injuries, many of them.
So I want to point this out, too, as well. For the 2015, out of the top 12 in standard scoring leagues, Devonta Freeman, your number 1, was at the start of the season a backup because Tevin Coleman was the starting running back for Atlanta.
Mm-hmm.
D'Angelo Williams, backup. And David Johnson, backup. And Danny Woodhead, backup. That's a lot of backups on that top 12 on the running back list. And that goes to prove, again, we mentioned it, he who drafted backups wins because the individual either listened to the program or they were smart enough and just said, I better just take out some insurance claims on somebody else's running backs. Because when I'm in a draft and I see somebody who picks up a Le'Veon Bell and it gets down into rounds 13, 14, 15, I look at the top 5, 6, 7 running backs and I just grab their backup, especially if somebody else has the stud running back. I'll take someone else's backup. This is war. It's fantasy football. I'm going to take your insurance policy because when he goes out, I win, and now you need to trade me.
Yep, that's absolutely right. Trade bait, or you wait till the inevitable happens, the injuries, and your guy steps right in and does what D'Angelo Williams did this season, or David Johnson, or Danny Woodhead, any of these guys. You know, the running back position itself is so volatile. Year to year, top 12s look different. Usually there's only 2, maybe 3 that repeat year after year. So it's a matter of targeting those guys if you can get your hands on them. And it's also a matter of doing what you said to do, which is grabbing those backups in the later rounds and, hoping for the best, because sometimes the best will happen.
That's right.
So, trying to project 2016, here's how I rank, and these are super early rankings, obviously. Here's how I rank 2016. I think Le'Veon Bell should be back up at number 1. What he did in 2014 was nothing short of breathtaking. and he's a guy that should be owned, and by the end of the first round, Le'Veon Bell should be off everybody's board. I put Peterson at 2 because he's just so consistent, and he's got a great offensive line in front of him. The Vikings are a team on the upswing, and they don't look to be changing their scheme anytime soon. Todd Gurley, I'm ranking 3rd for 2016, and if you're in a dynasty league, Todd Gurley should be at the top of that list. I have Devontae Freeman ranked 4th. I'm bringing LaShawn McCoy into the top 5 for 2016. Does that surprise you?
No, I don't think so. It's all about opportunity and what's around them for competition, and that's really what it comes down to.
David Johnson is my number 6 running back going into next season. Jamal Charles at 7, assuming he comes back healthy. Doug Martin, I'll keep in the top 12, even though every fiber of my being tells me, don't do it. Lamar Miller I have ranked in the top 12 as well at number 9, and I'm pretty sure at this point Lamar Miller is a lock to end up in anywhere but Miami next season, so we'll see what kind of situation he gets himself into. I think the Seattle situation is going to be very interesting to watch. Marshawn Lynch, do they sign him for a longer-term deal, or do they cut their losses and hope for the best with Thomas Rawls, who proved to be a very fine backup in the Pacific Northwest? My bet is that Rawls is your starting running back for the Seattle Seahawks next year. I would even give him top 12 consideration there.
Definitely, that team has proven it doesn't matter who's that running back, and Lynch's contract is too big. They'll let Rawls take over and kick Lynch to the curb. So, bold prediction: where do you think Lynch is going? If you had to pick a team right now.
Yeah, it's a great question.
I'm going Browns.
No.
It'll be funny.
No. How could that? No. I mean, come on. Lynch isn't going to go anywhere where they're not contending for a ring.
Not unless it's his last paycheck.
I don't think he's there yet. I think he's still got at least one good year left in him. And let's assume that's the case. So my ideal situation for Marshawn Lynch is he takes on the LeGarrette Blount role in New England.
Or he goes to Dallas.
I like Lamar Miller in Dallas. You know that.
Yeah, I think Forte is going somewhere.
He might
to Dallas.
That might be another possibility. There's a lot of interesting things that are going to happen in free agency at the running back position. It's almost pointless to try to go over a top 12 for 2016, but some of the situations I like are some of the guys I've already mentioned. I do like Dion Lewis coming back next season, depending on what happens with the Blount role there in the Patriots offense, and I do like Marshawn Lynch. I think wherever he ends up, he'll be a stud for another year, assuming he can stay healthy. So that's the running back position. Brian, if we're going to hand out an award, most valuable running back, let's call it the bell cow cowbell.
Well, I would say it has to be Devonta Freeman, just because of what he did for owners who had drafted him. Because he gave you those touchdowns. Well, you know what? I kind of want to change my mind. Because I want to give it to Adrian Peterson. Because he was consistent over every week of football except for maybe one. Whereas Devonta Freeman, a lot of his point total is loaded in those first 9 weeks.
Yeah, I'd say even less than that. But the true answer to this question, honestly, the Bell Cow Cowbell Award for 2015 goes to Devonta Freeman. And, well, that's my opinion. You can certainly make the argument Adrian Peterson should win the award. And I do not begrudge you that, Brian. But consider Devonta Freeman, even after those initial few weeks there where he piled on like 10 touchdowns over the course of 4 weeks, whatever it was, he was still giving you at least 100 combo yards, if not that, and a score every other week, with the exception of the week that he suffered that concussion, and then the week after where he had to sit out a game.
Yeah, I guess.
So he's a guy that is so dangerous because he can run all of those routes as a running back. He can split out. He can do it out of the backfield. This guy's a monster, and he's going to be great again next year, again, provided he stays healthy. That Falcons offensive line vastly improved over 2014. I know the Falcons are fans of Tevin Coleman, but from what I saw of Tevin Coleman this season, nothing more than a guy that'll allow Devontae Freeman a chance to take a Gatorade break on the sidelines for a play. Because Freeman's a 3-down back, and how many of those are left in the NFL?
Not many.
Not even Adrian Peterson, Brian.
Nope.
So there you have it. My bell cow, cowbell, Devontae Freeman. Let's move on to the wide receivers, and this is a group that I always keep a really close eye on because my draft strategy typically every year for the past, God, I couldn't even tell you, 7, 8, 9 years, has been to load up on top-notch receivers early because this is the group that sees the least amount of turnover aside from quarterbacks. So these are the guys year after year are showing up in the top 12.
Yeah, I dig me
injuries
some
aside, and injuries do happen as we saw this year with Des Bryant, for example. But injuries aside, the wide receiver group is usually a pretty consistent one.
Oh yeah, I definitely love me some stud wide receivers, and this year I drafted 4 right off the bat: wide receiver, wide receiver, wide receiver, wide receiver. I had myself stacked up for bye-week rotation and all the way through. I thought I was golden, but then some people didn't pan out the way I wanted to. So I'm the same way. I believe in at least get yourself 2 stud wide receivers, because you can pick up a good running back later on in the draft.
I think the top 6 wide receiver scorers in 2015, if you can get one of those, you're good. If you can get 2 of those for next season, you're going to win a Super Bowl. Antonio Brown was your number 1 scorer. He repeats from 2014. Last year, he scored 259.2 points in standard scoring leagues. This year, he scored 254.2, so only a difference of 5 points. Antonio Brown is your overall points leader at the wide receiver position. Julio Jones came in second at 239.1. That's compared to 195.4 that he scored last season as Fantasy's number 8 scoring wide receiver, and he dealt with some injuries, if I'm not mistaken, last year. Brandon Marshall came in at third. This was a big surprise to many, 230.2 points in standard scoring leagues. But like Brian and I have been talking about for weeks on end, there's a secret formula to that New York Jets offense.
Yeah, it's rewarding to see that kind of paying off. People are like, oh man, Marshall and Decker and Fitzpatrick, they got something special going on. Yeah, we've been shouting it since like week 5. So, yep. People who listen to us went out and you might have been able to snag Decker off the waiver wire. Brandon Marshall, we always have the running joke in one of my main important leagues is, whoever takes the first Jet off the board, it gets booed. Well, it was one of those things where I wish I would have taken Marshall, Decker, and Fitzpatrick, because you could have had them in like 3, 4. You could have Fitz was undrafted a lot. To have those 3 on your roster, they would have guaranteed you a lot of wins all the way across if you would have loaded up that way.
No question. Odell Beckham Jr. came in at number 4 this season at 228.3, followed by Allen Robinson at an even 225 points. Deandre Hopkins came in at number 6 at 221.1. And then there was a bit of a drop-off in numbers 7 through 12, but notable names including Doug Baldwin, who actually came in at number 7 on the season, an unbelievable tear at the end of this season. The question is, do you think he can keep it up in 2016 and beyond?
Well, history would say no
Right.
to that, just because it's Doug Baldwin. But who are we to say? Maybe they found something that worked and they're going to keep rolling with it. But I would bet my money on no, Doug Baldwin is not in the top 12 again next year.
I would agree completely, and I'll give you my top 12 for 2016 here in just a little bit. Rounding out my top 12 from 2015, A.J. Green, Brandon Cooks, Calvin Johnson, Eric Decker, the second of the Jets wide receivers. 2 Jets in the top 12. And Larry Fitzgerald came in at number 12 with 169.5. And again, nice to see the consistency, much like the quarterback position, where you look at rankings and who came in where. Those point spreads aren't that different between 2014 and 2015. So your top wide receiver for 2016 should be right in that same ballpark as what Antonio Brown has done the past 2 seasons. And Antonio Brown, probably to nobody's surprise, is my number 1 wide receiver going into drafts next year.
I was definitely excited. He fell to me in this year's draft and is my keeper from now until he retires.
You bet. I'm putting Odell Beckham in at second. Now, there's pretty stiff competition once you get past Antonio Brown for who you think might end up where in 2016, but I think Beckham, because it'll be another year with Eli Manning, and because we continue just to see amazing things from this guy, aside from his little hiccup with Josh Norman toward the end of the regular season this year, I think he learned his lesson there and probably won't be suspended again like that, but Beckham is just an amazing talent, and if you're in a dynasty league, Beckham is one of the best keepers you can possibly ask for.
Yeah, I definitely agree. If you look at this year's top, 12, if Beckham didn't get suspended that game, he would have been the number 3.
Or number 2.
Number 2.
He only came less than 11 points behind Julio Jones, who was the number 2. So, it's feasible that Odell Beckham could have been your number 2 in 2015 had it not been for that suspension. But again, that's where I'm ranking him for next year's number 2. I like DeAndre Hopkins at 3. Initially, when I thought about this, the reason I was ranking Hopkins higher than Brown and Beckham initially was because you look at what this guy's been able to do without even halfway decent quarterbacks under center in Houston. Imagine if they could draft themselves a Derek Carr type of player or a Blake Bortles, somebody young and promising that can get him the rock. I think DeAndre Hopkins is an amazing talent, right up there with Beckham, and I rank him at 3rd for 2016. Any objection?
No, because I think Houston will draft a new running back this year, or pick one up off of free agency.
Do you mean quarterback?
No, running back. I legitimately mean running back, because I think Hoyer's serviceable. He is not your biggest area of need. I think your biggest area of need is a running back. So, they don't have to keep dropping one of them linebackers back into coverage. A good running back on the Texans, and Arian Foster's not the answer. That makes Hopkins that much more better, because you can't drop that linebacker back into coverage anymore. You need to keep him up front.
The rest of my top 12 in 2016 include Allen Robinson, who I jump up to number 4. He had himself an incredible season, ranking 5th at 225 points even this year. So Allen Robinson jumps up a spot. Julio Jones down to number 5. And it's not because I don't believe what he did this year. It's just that I think the competition behind him will be that much stronger and in better spots in 2016. So Jones is my 5th. Marshall will be number 6 for me. A.J. Green 7. Jordy Nelson makes his appearance at 8 on this list. I think Jordy comes back, and I think he gets right back into, I think the Packers end up being the team that they once were. You watch, they'll plug Jordy right back in, and the Packers will be the team they were in 2014.
Maybe. It pains me to admit that the Packers will be back to being good at anything, so I'll give you a maybe.
It pains you. I'm a Vikings fan. How do you think I feel? No. I like Sammy Watkins in the top 12 next year. I love what he's been able to do, even against elite talent, so I rank him at number 9. Julian Edelman at 10. I'll give Des Bryant a nod at 11, although I could easily be talked out of that. And I think Kelvin Benjamin coming back next year is going to be a bargain. So I'm ranking him in my top 12 as well.
Yeah, I definitely think so. Cam has developed as a passer. If you look at what he's been doing and the throws he's been making downfield, he has clearly taken that next step in the game. He has been working on it a lot. And it's funny because I was looking at this roster, just kind of glanced, I'm like, Travis Benjamin? What are you kidding me? But I was like, oh, no, wait, the other Benjamin. It is one of those things where you have your number one and your number two, and then after that it's about 10 other guys because it's tough to go 7, 8, 9, 10. It's really 1, 2, and then 10 other dudes.
Yeah, we'll see what happens in the Carolina offense in the offseason. See if they make any more moves to try to improve the situation there. I think they're looking pretty sweet defensively. Could probably use a little offensive line help, which will help their cause as well. So if we're handing out an award to the most valuable wide receiver, who is our split out stud this season, in your opinion, Brian?
Antonio Brown. Because for 3 games, he had Michael Vick for 2 of them, and then I don't even remember the third guy that was thrown in the ball.
Landry Jones. So there were 3 games. There was one game he had 30 yards. There was one game he had like 48, and then one he had 56, which is 100 below each game than what he normally does. So he didn't even have his option there. He literally took 3 games off this season and still number 1. Yeah, I mean, there's no way you could argue that anybody but Antonio Brown should win the award this season for best overall wide receiver. My only concern with him going forward is the quarterback situation you just mentioned. If Big Ben ever gets hurt and misses significant time, I think his fantasy value takes a pretty massive hit, and you can take a look at some of the guys just behind him as likely candidates to try to steal that top spot in 2016. All right, on to the tight end position, a position in which Brian and I are very proud of here in 2015.
You bet.
I think we made probably the best call of the year back in week 4, I want to say it was.
Well, I thought it was week 3.
Maybe it was 3.
I thought it was 3 when you anointed Barnage as the sneaky play of the season and go out and snatch him up now.
He ended up with 158.3 points in standard scoring leagues. That's second to, of course, Rob Gronkowski, your number 1 tight end. Amazing to look at the consistency of Gronk, Brian. He scored 184.6 points this season. He scored 184.4 points in 2014.
It's almost as if, like, they knew this was coming, and here's what. It kind of makes you wonder that in the play calling, they know exactly how many yards they want to get Gronk before they move the ball elsewhere. They don't want to overplay their hand or underplay their hand. So they know they need to hit him X amount of times, and we want to get him involved about this much, and then we'll spread the ball around from there.
There's a decent amount of turnover in the top 12 this season as compared to last. Barnage made his first appearance this season and came in at number 2. Jordan Reed came in right behind Barnage at number 3 with 155.2 points. Jordan Reed, a guy that's got all the talent in the world, but the health concerns. That's always the big thing for Jordan Reed. Can he stay healthy? And if he can, he's about the only guy I think in the entire league that could get even close to Gronkowski level production at the tight end position.
Yeah, they definitely utilized him a ton, and he meant so much to the Redskins this year. It was unbelievable.
Delaney Walker comes in at number 4, and he was a guy I was touting early on before drafts, and I was talking about tight ends you could get relatively cheap because most people were targeting Jimmy Graham, Rob Gronkowski, Greg Olsen in the early rounds. I was looking at guys like Delaney Walker in the 9th, 10th, 11th rounds, and he ended up being one of the reception leaders in the NFL, come to find out.
Yeah, he was a huge pickup. And like you just said, you were getting, in some drafts, I was watching the tight end market. You got the top 3 or 4. Other than that, it's slim pickings. And there were some where Delaney Walker wasn't even taken. So it's always smart to look at history, statistics, and opportunity.
Yeah, it's amazing. Those people obviously weren't listening to this show to their peril. Brian.
That's right.
Greg Olsen came in at number 5. Tyler Eifert at 6. Benjamin Watson at 7. Travis Kelce 8. Richard Rodgers at 9. Then Zach Ertz, Antonio Gates, and Jason Witten round out your top 12 from 2015. It's tough to look at 2014. There's a lot of names in there that didn't make an appearance in 2015. Martellus Bennett among them. Kobe Fleener. Dwayne Allen. Heath Miller. I mean, I know people were thinking going into 2015 that the tight end position was going to be very boom or bust. It turns out it was a very consistent position for about the top 6, 7, 8 guys.
Yeah, I really dug this position, and this is one of those that helps you win the league. If you have done your research and you understand what's available, look at the people who drafted Jimmy Graham. Look at the people who drafted Colby Fleener. Julius Thomas was a huge one. There were lots of these people who took these, I'm drafting off a name recognition only. And that was the worst thing that they could have done because, like you said, you go out there, you get the Barnage, you get Delaney Walker, you get Ben Watson, you get Richard Rodgers. You're snagging these guys and you're winning because, once you get outside of that top 12 is even a worse drop-off. And those people were stuck with tight ends that catch 2 balls a game, and you've got someone like Delaney Walker who's, catching 6 or 7 a game.
Or more. Yeah.
Or more.
No question. So looking at 2016, there's no way you can bet against Gronk at number 1, so I got him ranked there. You've got the rest of my rankings in front of you. I'll run down them real quick, and then you can tell me where you disagree. Greg Olsen is my number 2 tight end. Jordan Reed at 3. Tyler Eifert at 4, Delaney Walker 5, Zach Ertz jumps up to 6, Gary Barnage at 7, Julius Thomas in at 8, Travis Kelce at 9, Benjamin Watson 10, Eric Ebron of the Lions 11, and Max Williams, this year a rookie in Baltimore, another year under his belt, and in a tight end friendly offense with the Ravens comes in at 12. Where do you agree or disagree there, Brian?
Well, I disagree because that's what I like to do more. Is I wouldn't have Olsen at 2. I would have him a little bit lower with the return of Kelvin Benjamin. So I think that hurts his value a little bit, and I stress a little bit. So just a little bit. And someone I would drop totally out is Zach Ertz because the Eagles are just you don't know what is going to happen in Philadelphia. And Ertz didn't show enough for me this year because there were games where he completely disappeared and he had maybe 1 or 2 targets, tops.
Yeah, but not at the end of the season, Brian. He was my bargain bin pick for a reason in Week 17, and he panned out and then some. He had 140-some yards, I think, receiving in Week 17. He was getting targeted a ton near the end of the season. Part of that was a banged-up Brent Selleck, and I don't think they're going to bring Selleck back next year, so that's why I bumped Ertz up. I think he is definitely, he's more reliable than Jordan Matthews in that offense, quite honestly.
Well, anybody was more reliable than Jordan Matthews.
One of the wide receivers that burned you this year, I'm guessing.
Very much so. I lost because of him. So we'll agree to disagree on Zach Ertz. I think opportunity you talk about all the time, Brian, I think it's there for Ertz in next year and in years to come. Anything else you see that you disagree with? No, just those 2. I think Max Williams, you got him there at 12. I think he has a good opportunity to move up there. I really do. I really like that kid. Watson, I'll agree with. If Brees really is sticking around. Reed, obviously. Ebron, you look at what the Lions did over the second half of the season. They went 6-2 in the last 8 games. Matt Stafford was the top quarterback in the last 8 games of the season.
And Calvin Johnson may or may not be in a Lions uniform next year. So, again, that's an opportunity pick right there with Eric Ebron. With Greg Olsen, I think the reason I ranked him so high at number 2 is because he's never missed a game, ever, for any reason.
Yeah, he's there, obviously. He's not going to fall down to 10. Yeah, he would be in my top 5. I was just finding something wrong with your stuff, just to find something wrong with your stuff.
I thought you'd pick Julius Thomas out of that bunch. You didn't even mention him.
I didn't want to waste my breath.
Same reason Jared Cook will never be in one of my lists.
Yep.
That's for sure. So if you're giving an MVP out to the tight end position, who is your barn burner of the year, Brian?
Well, I want to anoint Barnage because he rose from the ashes of a burning barn. Whoa, pun alert. But if I am giving out an MVP award, it's most valuable player. And I will go with Jordan Reed because he single-handedly got the Redskins into the playoffs.
Yeah, but we're talking fantasy here, so I'm going with Gary Barnidge. He's going to be the first annual recipient of the Barn Burner Award, which was named after him.
We need trophies.
I know. He needs a barn burner trophy.
Barn
I
burner trophy.
want to send it to him, and he'll put it on his mantle. And I'll send him the audio clip of me saying, Gary Barnidge is a guy to keep an eye on. I might not start him this week, but I would definitely keep an eye on this guy.
We are actually going to make that happen.
Yes.
I will track him down. I'm going to do this. I am going to do that. Is going to be my off-season mission, is to get a trophy to Barnidge for the first annual 2015 515 Fantasy Football Barn Burner recipient.
I want him to know that, all these national pundits, all these big-name guys on ESPN and everywhere else, I want them to know that you guys can go ahead and try to claim Gary Barnidge. That it started right here in Des Moines, Iowa, on this show.
On 1350 ESPN radio, which they probably listen to. And they're like, oh, man, we got to steal these guys. They're in the cornfield. No one's listening. Yeah, we got you.
That phone call from Matthew Berry. Come on, Matthew.
It's on the internet. It is logged forever. So
it is.
It's there.
We called Gary Barnidge. That was a big one this year, and we'll take that all the way to the proverbial bank. So, Brian, we got less than 10 minutes left in our final show of the year. I wanted to have a couple conversations real quick. One on league variations. Are there any variations to sort of freshen things up in leagues that you can offer? Because I have a couple here.
Well, I do. I do have one, and it is an NFL rule change that was instituted. The missed extra point. I am a huge proponent of I don't like negative points for missed field goals because that's something that's completely out of your control. If the coach is just banging one from 63 just for the heck of it with 2 seconds left in the half, that should not hurt you because that's a stupid situation. They're just doing it to do it. But
agreed.
The extra point is something that is controlled. It's from 30 yards. You should be making this, because you have to kick it all the time. So when they move that extra point back and you've seen all of these mixed extra points, I think that is a legitimate variation to put in there, missed extra point penalty.
I'm going to go ahead and disagree. I don't think kickers should ever be given negative points unless they're trying to carry a ball and fumble or something. Missed kicks, I can't get behind that. In fact, I think we had a conversation earlier in the season that the fantasy kicker is sort of becoming irrelevant in a way.
Yeah, but hey, you know what? If you're looking to spice it up a little bit,
I wouldn't change much, truth be told. I think I'm a fan of half-point PPR leagues. If you're going to give up points for receptions, I think full-point PPR just seems like you're awarding them too much for just doing their job.
Yeah, a full point PPR is a league where you can win by drafting nobodies.
Yeah.
I mean, look at someone we called on a bargain bin was Theo Riddick. And in a PPR league, he was a stud that you could literally walk out, pick up, and then drop a week later. Because he was getting some rushing yards, but then he was catching 7 balls. And that's so many points. A full point on a PPR is insane.
Are you in any dynasty leagues by chance?
No, I'm not. Just because they aggravate me, and I don't like other people and how they play. So
I'm a huge proponent of dynasty leagues. Auction with franchise players, restricted free agents, rookie contracts, and a salary cap. It's more closely reflective of a real NFL roster depending on the size of the contracts you're dealing with. One of my leagues, we have a $3,500 salary cap, and that is sort of if you take that and multiply it by a certain number, you come up with the number that a lot of these players are making in the millions. We don't want to deal in the millions in fantasy because it gets to be just too much math, and nobody wants to do that. So I'm a huge proponent of dynasty keeper leagues. Again, auctions are a lot of fun. If you ever want to look into that, there are a lot of websites out there that'll teach you how, and you can easily transition from your old school snake drafts to a full-blown dynasty. in no time at all. Another cool idea that I've come across from listening to some other programs that deal in fantasy football, some folks that I respect greatly, came up with the idea of an Empire League, Brian. That is
this
when
Star
winnings
Wars?
I know, right? I know. That how cool would that be? In fact, I think we just stumbled upon something, right?
Perfect.
Either I'm on to something or on something. Either way, the Empire League is where winnings are paid out year to year, but an amount of the league's choosing is placed in a rolling pot that cannot be collected until someone wins 2 championships in a row, at which time the league is dissolved. What do you think of that idea?
That's actually kind of funny. That's actually kind of funny. I like it. I like it a lot, actually. That's pretty cool. In mine, the one that I commish, we have a rule where the winner gets to pick the last place team's team name for the whole next year with no limitations. Great it can idea. Get personal. It can get dirty and disgusting. It does not matter, and that person has to deal with it. So last year, we instituted the rule. Well, the guy who's getting last place this year is quitting.
Wow, is that right?
Yep, he's flat out quitting. Nope, not doing it. I quit. So we got an opening if you want to be named whatever the winner wants you to be.
Well, I'll tell you what, Brian, for co-hosting a show together and being friends as long as we have, I'm amazed that we aren't in a league together.
Well, this might be the year, man. This might be the year that we officially cross party lines and put on the war gauntlets.
I get to be the expletive deleteds. I
Pretty
can't
much.
say those words on the radio, Brian. Before we wrap up, and again, hopefully you've taken some of those ideas and you can use those to help freshen things up in your long-standing leagues. Before we wrap up, though, got a few minutes left here, Brian. I want to thank you for all the hard work this season. You're an amazing partner in all of this, and this is just year one, man. Got a long, bright future ahead of us, as far as I can tell.
Well, thank you very much. I appreciate that, first and foremost, and thank you. We've had so much fun, and this was just done on a whim. You know, we had some great fun at the Comic-Con that was in town, and I just doing my own podcasting stuff with Walking Dead stuff, and, you know, hey, do you want to do a fantasy football one? Let's get this thing going, and off to the races. Here we are having a blast and just being stat nerds and winning people championships. I love hearing someone who emails and say, hey, guess what? My team, the Wiener Winks, won the championship this year, and it's because I listened to you guys. You know?
We have gotten some of those compliments on Twitter and other places. We thank you so much for sharing that with us. It means a lot to Brian and I both. The fact that neither of us could win championships this season, that stinks, but that's how it goes, man. You can't win them every single year. As we head into the offseason, and granted, we hope you don't completely forget about us. We are on Facebook, 515 Fantasy Football, on Twitter, at 515 Fantasy. We hope you'll find us, follow us there, and on iTunes, please do us a huge favor. Go to iTunes and rate the show. Write a review if you can, too. It'll help everybody find us. I did a search the other day, just a generic search for fantasy football, and though we're near the bottom, we're on the list, Brian, so we've sort of made it.
We're on the list, and while you're bringing up iTunes, I want to take a time out here. We are discussing off-season content, so if you want to stay involved with 515 Fantasy Football, if you want to hear maybe about some upcoming contests that we may be having in some way, shape, or form, some NFL draft news, follow 515 Fantasy Football, go to iTunes, Stitcher, and hit subscribe.
We would absolutely love that. And again, like I said, rating the show and leaving a review, taking the time out to do that for us is greatly appreciated. We can't thank you enough for listening to our show week in and week out here in year number 1. Again, if you have won a championship, and it's even in part because of us, it's a huge compliment to just a couple of guys who have a real passion for fantasy football, just like you do. I have just completed my 23rd season. Brian, his how many seasons now? 17 completed for you? Wow.
Yeah,
that's
something
amazing.
right along in there, man.
We'll have to change the sounder at the beginning of the show to reflect the fact that we are now combined over 40 years experience. Anyway, we thank you again so much for listening, and we hope you'll stay in touch with us, the 515 Fantasy Football Show.